Hi, my name is Siddharth Srikanth. I recently wrote The Case for Nature. I'm currently an investor in climate and nature projects and companies.
Hello, my name is Yuvan Avis. I am a naturalist, writer, and an educator. My recent book is intertitled A Coast and Marsh Diary.
A lot of people call this an existential crisis. I think the pointy end of the crisis is human suffering. There's a lot of it. And there's a lot of it already in a safe climate, and it's going to be a lot more in an unstable climate, which we are in right now. So that's actually the crisis, right? I think if you look back at the history of life on Earth, Earth has gone through much bigger shocks. People call this, and this has come back to nature, people call this sixth mass extinction, which implies there have been 5 before this. Life has always survived. I'm not saying it will always survive in the future. At some point, Earth has a finite biological life. The sun will die and the Earth will go away, but that's billions of years in the future. On the order of millions of years, life on Earth is going to be fine. Even human beings might survive in some form. I think that's actually not what we think about when we think about the climate crisis or the nature crisis. We think about immense human suffering that is entirely avoidable. And I would add personally, immense non-human suffering that is also avoidable.
Very recently, a few months ago, Earth Commission quantified just and safe boundaries for all of the 9 Earth systems. Everything is far beyond the threshold. Climate is, in fact, the least affected. It's still within the safe threshold, as per whatever quantifiable methods they're using. But then biodiversity loss, it's almost irretrievable. It's changes in water systems, chemical flows, aerosol loading. All of these are somewhere else. I think it's important. I think the word nature, a case for nature, which Siddharth says in his book, is a much more beautiful world, because the real crisis is not climate crisis. It's a crisis of diminishing life and living conditions, and that would perhaps encompass all Earth system boundaries. Yeah, because we should see ourselves within a crisis, and not that there's something coming and I'm trying to avoid it, but deeply in it. And some people are deeper in it, others can avoid its effects. So that sense of it is here and it's sitting in the living room needs to be the perspective, rather than let's find some hope in the future.
I would love to see the nature crisis, which is the kind of broader Earth systems crisis, talked about in the same terms as the climate crisis. And that's not to say the climate crisis is not incredibly urgent. I just reflect on how successful we've been. And again, we have a long way to go, but we've been really successful at communicating the urgency of the climate crisis, making it simple, making it understandable. So by and large, actually, climate denial is a fringe view. We've done it. Nature denial is actually the default. And we just assume that nothing's going on, or some rare and charismatic species is going extinct. But basically no one understands that Earth's life support systems are failing. And so that would be my kind of near-term goal. If at every level, individual, corporate, government, whatever it might be, people acknowledge that this is a much broader crisis, with climate being an incredibly important part of it, but all these other pieces sitting alongside it.
I would be deeply interested in education systems, where the kind of relationalities and cell-deep experiences, sometimes when we use the word nature, it seems to be out there, but we are ecosystems. We have our own flows, and we are hydrosphere and biosphere, and there's no other way than to be. And so the kind of spaces children experience, I think could be a tremendously culture-changing force. Sort of almost uprooting, reimagining from the bottom, and that would perhaps be where I'd put my effort, although it's not complete as such, which I'm aware of, but that's where I would put my effort. Yeah.
Ultimately, at least in theory, governments respond to incentives and should be aiming for public goods. And nature is an amazing provider of public goods, whether it's clean air, a more stable climate in your local area, pollination services. I mean, this example I use in the book, and I look at and I actually visited a number of cities across the world. Not all of them call their interventions nature-based solutions or anything, but their citizens have demanded cleaner air, which is a long-standing demand, spaces that are green so they can kind of walk around, their kids can play in, And then you go back and look at the benefits of those interventions, incredibly clear, not just in kind of well-being terms, but in economic terms, in terms of lower physical and mental health costs for the communities that have access to natural spaces. So I think policymakers should be very aware of what they can do, because they might be saving money by doing this as well as protecting our environment. For companies, I think the way this is beginning to bite, like I was saying, is when the costs of nature risks are rising, companies need to secure their supply chains of food commodities or fiber commodities. Water is an incredibly important resource that lots of companies are grappling with. So when you think about nature risk, most companies are blind or flying blind right now, and they need to pay real attention. And those that do, I think, will find they have a competitive advantage, because they're planning not just for the next year, but for the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. And so I do think there's an economic case there. Now, at the level of the people, I think is where it really hits home. For me, individuals and the way they live their lives have probably the most important thing you allocate is your time, not your money, for the average person. And allocating your time to something that matters, like, protecting and restoring our planet, can be incredibly rewarding, both because I love it, Yuvan loves it, but there are lots of amazing jobs being created, I think, in this space. And so young people now entering the job market should look to the space and say, oh my God, I don't have to go down a traditional path. I can do this and make a living. And so at every level, I think the economic case applies.
As human beings, and as when we are children, we pass through several developmental planes. And, people like Richard Loeb and Gail Menzel, they look at E.O. Wilson. He says there's something called biophilia, which children have naturally. And then after a point, the sensorial and also, portals for curiosity is not supported, provided. Although there's a lot of upcoming research that nature in the child's life is crucial from cognitive to emotional to physical, social, and so on. What seems to be lacking is the connection and an emplacement in one's local living world in these formative developmental periods, childhood, adolescence, in the most meaningful, relevant ways in which schools can easily do if they want to. My nature educator colleagues and I, we have created something called the action pedagogy, and this is in consultation, of course, our own experience as well as people like Louis Chawla from Boulder University, who's looking at, what makes somebody a lifelong, environmentally conscious, engaged person, an activist or a volunteer, or whatever form that might take. And the bottom line is this: awareness does not create action. That is, the void between ignorance and knowledge is very small versus knowledge and action. So what we are finding is a practice of action breeds action. And by action, I'm not just talking about activism, just ways of living, relating, and to feel one's identity and selfhood enmeshed, emplaced with, in a multi-species world. That's a cultural value. And so 3 things for that. We have 3 pillars for our pedagogy. That is, all kinds of learning, relating, involves direct action, not just the intellect, but the senses, but all kinds of other things. And then local relevance, which is really the arena of action. And then this very crucial thing called interconnectedness, the social, political, ecological, all of them unsiloed and put together such that the learner, the human being, sees immense relevance in this way of learning and being.